record there, hit record there. I'll have to run over here. Awkwardly. All right. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes. Let me, why don't you really quickly, for the Facebook Live audience, introduce yourself, and then I'm going to hit record here. And we're going to talk about local poetry. We're going to talk about Walt Whitman. We're going to talk about the role of the poet in a culture, in a society, and in your personal life. And who knows what the heck else we're going to talk about. You know, I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of cool stuff. So, introduce yourself, please, sir.
Hello, I'm Orion Bays. I'm a writer and a filmmaker and a poet. I live in San Antonio. I've lived here since the 70s, on and off. I consider this my hometown. I'm a big fan of San Antonio. And, yes, my YouTube channel is Elijah1. Check out my Rave-On hip-hop performances on Elijah1.
Okay, Elijah1. Elijah.
No space.
No space. So it's, how do you spell it?
E-L-I-J-A-H, Elijah.
All right.
El, the name of God was, back in the day, was El.
Okay.
Or no, it was Jah, or no, I got the story.
Yahweh.
Yahweh.
Yahweh, yeah.
Yeah, so I think Elijah is a derivative of, the name of God.
Oh, okay.
He was a big-time prophet.
Yes.
There's all great stories about Elijah out of the Bible.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
My great...
So that's where it comes from.
Yeah, my great-great-great-grandfather's name was Elijah. He was a Baptist preacher.
Okay.
As was his son, my great-great-grandfather. As was his grandson, my father.
Okay. Wow. So it's in your blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Is that, do you think, where the poetry comes from? In your book that just came out, by the way, what I want to say to you. I want to make sure you guys all see this. Check it out. It's a great little poem. But so is that in your blood, do you think?
What I want to say to you was my Baptist preacher voice. I noticed that a lot of my poetry was declarative rather than reflective or confessional or some other voice.
Oh,
I realized
interesting.
that was the Baptist preacher gene.
Yeah.
So I dedicated that book to Elijah.
Okay.
And to that voice.
Yeah.
And telling you all about it.
Definitely. Okay, so you find yourself to be a little bit of a preacher. And a poet. And preachers are often poets in general. They just tend to not... I mean, I think the better preachers tend to be poets to some degree, right? Would you agree?
Definitely. Martin Luther King.
Yeah, he was poetic.
I have a vague memory of my father would sit in his study in solitude and would listen for the voice of God to come down and give him the message to deliver unto the people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of something that I do every day when I go to the cafe.
That's good. You do it every day.
Pretty
much. Which cafe do you go to? Here in San Antonio.
Yeah, Rosella's is probably my number one spot.
Okay.
Brown Coffee is...
Which Rosella's? There's now more than one.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They're at Jones and Broadway.
Okay, the original.
Yeah.
The original. Now when it blows up, you'll get to say, I started at the original.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay. Yeah, I go there sometimes too, although it's pretty far from here. Yeah. So I'm hoping they'll bring some more cool, hip coffee shops here. I don't have a spot here. I mean, my spot is, I hate to say it, but it's a bar spot. The Flying Saucer. Not too far from here. But I have to be careful because too much drinking of alcohol is not a good thing in general. I'm not old, but I'm not young yet or anymore. Not as young. So I don't want to be, going down that road all the time drinking. So I'm like, I'm going to be careful. So I really want, there's local coffee not too far from here, but I need something a little bit more local. That's like right here. I would love that. I used to live downtown Denver on a high-rise right downtown, and right downstairs was the greatest bakery coffee shop for me. I loved it.
Denver's great for that.
Yeah.
I was watching this documentary on PBS, and it was about the history of beer, I think. And they made the point that the American Revolution was fomented in the coffee shops and pubs of Boston. That's the purpose of cafes and pubs and bars, is to get together to interact.
They don't do that anymore.
They don't do that too much anymore.
Well, in the French it was called the salons. So the intellectual revolutions of the 1700s, they all started in the salons, and you would go to your salon and talk, and then you would drink coffee, or you drink wine or espresso and whatever, and then you would talk to each other, and that's where these intellectuals kind of birthed.
Soiree.
Yeah. So I mean, there's definitely a loss of that. I know there's a group in San Antonio, I can't remember what they're called, but I went to them once. I met them on a meetup, and they do that kind of thing. And I think part of what I'm trying to do with all of this is actually something similar. So one of my desires is to show that that kind of thing's happening, to take this kind of group offline too sometimes, to, you know, make it mobile and to have, you know, the fomenting of revolution.
Mobile shows?
So I'm working on it. I not with this setup, but I do mobile shows with, you know, I have a digital audio recorder that's very mobile, and it's basically like a studio in your pocket, and I have a couple wired, I don't have wireless right now, mics that go in there. It sounds really good, and I can be pretty mobile with that. So yeah, you know, I'm working on different models for making it possible, but the most important thing, because there's a lot of people with great setups in this country, you know, like there's a lot of people who are able to record like we are, and they do record. I mean, I think it was the Google founder, Sergey Brin, who like 4 years ago said that in like every day we produce more content than in the history of mankind before that, something like that. Which, so we're living in a time when it's definitely, there's a lot of people doing it because it's so affordable, but most people, it's not that important, like what they're saying. They're not doing it well, they're not building community, it's more about them talking to themselves any way that they want to, and that is, you know, and they're not helpful. They're not doing what I think poets should do.
Of value to society.
Yeah, I think, well, they want to talk only about themselves, which I understand, that's important, but, like, so we're going to talk about Whitman. And Whitman is famous for this, so I think it's a very good, you know, interesting thought about Whitman. I'm not a Whitman scholar by any stretch of the imagination. I rarely understand what the heck he's talking about 90% of the time. But, I mean, his most famous thing is, you know, Song of Myself. Yeah. But when we talk about a noiseless patient spider, and I think what he was trying to get across, there's an element where when he's saying that in the sense that he is you and you are him, and it's kind of the reciprocal nature of poets and of writers in general, I think, which is something that we've lost to a large degree. We don't, or at least I don't feel it anymore very often, where someone's really speaking for you, like, you know, that's what a good writer says, or does. Like, when a good writer says something, I think you put it really well, actually, in your book. Let me see, I think I underlined it. If it's not familiar but rings true, that might be poetry. I think that's the best way. So that is how you put it in your book. Very worthwhile. By the way, you can get this on Amazon, right?
You get it on Amazon or at the Twig in the Pearl?
At the Twig at the Pearl. Plug for the Twig, all right. That's cool. So anyway, but that's my view of, like, someone who, and it's hard to actually resonate with your audience. Like, where you actually speak for them in your own words, without it just being about whatever the heck you want, right?
Right. Well, I think that's the reason a writer is because they want to connect. Yeah. And if you can connect successfully with people, you are a good writer, and B, you are kind of speaking on their behalf. You have formed a connection. You've flashed your filament and you've connected.
Filament, there you go. Yes, you're already going in the filament. Yeah, I agree totally, and I think there's it seems like there's a loss of that, but I could be wrong. It could just be me. And I remember reading a quote about poets, great poets. Something like, I don't know who said it, but something like, a great poet is someone who's struck by lightning 2 or 3 times. Nice. And that's it. And so, like, out of, you know, when we read poets like Whitman, or anybody who T.S. Eliot, I just bought The Wasteland, which I've read a long time ago, but I haven't read it in a long time. I like Eliot, and I don't know why. I never know why I like poets. I know why I like literature people. Poets is different. It's kind of like when you like a person, it's hard to describe it. You know what I mean? Yeah. When you like a movie, I can analyze a movie and say, oh, I like these pieces. Like, I like the movie Whiplash, Damien Chazelle, if you know that one. But anyway, but it's different than poets, I think.
Yeah,
it's more personal.
Assumably, you felt a little bit of his lightning.
That's it.
When you read that who were you talking about?
Well, I don't remember who said the quote of lightning, but like T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland, or Whitman himself, which, again, with him, it's I don't know what it is about. Maybe it's free verse for me, or I have a difficulty understanding.
Well, you kind of have to break down the logic of language and how we normally formulate it, and the routines that go on in our mind before you can feel that lightning. Yeah. Because that lightning's got to break through all that.
Yep. Yep.
So it's kind of a deconstruction process sometimes, which for many people is uncomfortable, and they're not willing to do that work or go through that process. But then you don't get the lightning either. All you get is just common familiarities, which is not poetry.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, for sure. And I think part of the project here, why I named it Poems for People Who Hate Poetry, is, I was a poetry hater all the way up. I'm 32 now. All the way up till I was like 27, 28. And then I learned, I listened to a lecture from a philosophy professor, just a very simple 1 hour lecture, maybe an hour and a half, that he just said, just 8 poems I like and why. Yeah. And the way he described it and the way he talked about it really finally resonated. Oh, yeah. And because I always loved literature, just not poetry, right? It always seemed crazy to me. And then it kind of opened up a whole new world.
Oh, good, because poetry goes back to the very beginning of language.
Exactly.
When we first became able to form words and use language, we found that they had power. And when they started telling their stories with that rhythm and the rhyme and the alliteration, it had power, and you could perform, you could amaze people, and you could carry the cultural icons of your tribe down to the next generation. Poetry is the original art form, maybe along with drumming, playing the flute, and dancing.
Yeah. Well, they probably went together, right? Yeah, I'm sure. Like, I think I read somewhere, more than likely, poetry started as chanting. Like, if you look at primitive people, they chant, they love to use language, they love to scream and shout, and but they use the vocality of everything to express a deep primal emotion. And then, like, for sure, prose comes after verse. Like, even if you read ancient geography texts, like when they're describing the land, they do it in verse. So they actually are rhyming when they're, even when they're doing counting. Like when they're doing counting of like ships and the cattle, it's all in verse. When you go far enough back at the origins of language, so like you're saying, verse comes first. And then prose is something that we impose onto language. And now we're at such an advanced, quote unquote advanced stage in civilization that I think we only see the prose and we forget the verse. But kids don't. Yeah. Ring Around the Rosie, like they love all that stuff. Right. But we lose it as we get older very quickly.
That's the thing. The most popular form of poetry or music right now is hip hop, and it's exactly like how it started out.
Yeah, yeah.
It's got the rhythm. It's got the chanting. It's got the chorus comes in.
Yeah. So you like hip hop?
I do.
Yeah.
I've been influenced by it.
Yeah, for sure, because it's.
I'm not into whole, all the ghetto shit, but.
Yeah.
The rhythm of it, the feeling of it. Definitely.
Well, yeah, the form they created, I think is good, and yeah, some people you're not going to resonate with their message, but even like if you don't resonate with their message, there's some people who, their message is bad, but their form is flawless, right? Like if you listen to a lot of Eminem stuff at the beginning, I was a kid when he came out, and I mean it blew me away at the time to hear that stuff, like to hear Eminem. He hit a nerve for sure with, I think when his first or second LP came out, I was like 12, 13 or something like that. So I was a kid, right?
So that was
and he's talking about killing
experience.
Yeah, it's just a weird thing. But he's talking about killing his mother. Yeah. So the message is really bad, I think, in the way he's trying to say it. He's super angry. But he definitely knows how to hit a rhyme and how to flow.
Came up in the clubs of Detroit, man, and he had to bring it.
He had to bring it. Yeah. No, he did it on the fly, and it's if you know anything about ancient Roman culture, they did the same thing. Yeah. They didn't call it hip hop, but they had poets. You bring like a colloquium of poets if you're a rich patron, and they would just like go at it, and they would just like riff. Right?
I'm kind of a historical romanticist. I like to imagine the first people that lived here. Where we live, this city called San Antonio, this was the Garden of Eden of North America. We've got two spring-fed streams that come out and flow down. Right now, it's in that fertile valley in between those two streams is downtown San Antonio. Yeah. The original settlement was the Missions and La Villita. But before all that, the people who were living here, probably for 20,000 years, in the cradle of nature, everything they needed was provided, man. There was food, there was buffaloes, there was fruit, there was water, everything. What kind of stories did they tell around the campfire at night? What kind of performances did they have? I just love to imagine that.
Yeah, that would be an interesting time. Just to, and you can imagine that as a poet. as a creator. That's part of it. But yeah, I mean, that's the romantic side. As you can imagine what it was like. Obviously, there's also going to be bad things that we're going to take out of how wonderful it is to live in nature. But that's the luxury of being a poet today or in any time. You can look back and have that element of what you like about the past and almost skip what you don't like.
Yeah.
So, why don't we... So this poem, A Noiseless Patient Spider, is very short. So I thought I would actually just read it quickly, and then we can kind of talk stanza by stanza, or break it down.
Figure out what the heck he's talking about.
So you can help me figure it out a little bit. I have some thoughts. He might just be... you have to take a little bit of patience with his patient spider. But, break it down, and then I gather, before I read it, I think it's something to do with the poetic process and the reciprocal nature of poet and reader, is how I took it. Not only reader in his time, but for all time, like reading it a couple hundred years later. And then I wanted to talk some about your poetry, because, you're a poet, and I know you're inspired by Whitman, you said, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, a little bit? Okay. Yeah. All right, so let me just read this real quick. All right, A Noiseless Patient Spider by Walt Whitman. A noiseless patient spider I marked where on a little promontory it stood isolated, marked how to explore the vacant, vast surrounding. It launched forth filament, filament, filament out of itself, ever unreeling them, ever tirelessly speeding them. And you, oh my soul, where you stand, surrounded, detached, in measureless oceans of space, ceaselessly musing, venturing, throwing, seeking the spheres to connect them, till the bridge you will need be formed, till the ductile anchor hold, till the gossamer thread you fling catch somewhere, oh, my soul. It's a nice poem, right? I don't know what he's saying 100%. but we can read, if you had any lines that...
I imagine Walt Whitman standing on the street corner in Brooklyn selling his poem for a book. That's how I see him. Leaves of Grass which was his main work, kind of grew and grew and grew. And I think he was kind of working on it all the time. And he self-published it and sold it. And he was trying to connect with people. And I can imagine that was the feeling of that patient spider, trying to connect his filament to something, trying to build a web, trying to find some meaning in his world. This vast ocean, this world that we live in, is truly infinite. Our mind can't comprehend that, but it is.
Yeah,
especially up in the sky, it's blue.
Yeah.
But actually, if you look at the Earth from outer space, it's black, because that is outer space up there. It goes on for freaking ever.
Yeah, yeah. So he's trying to understand one drop of connection.
Yeah.
Which is very difficult. And he loved America, and America is vast itself. Not even talking about the space where it's even more infinite, but just America itself. You can walk forever and never touch everything.
And back in that day, when America had so much potential to grow and expand,
they had no idea what was out there.
I was looking at the dollar bill the other day, and there's this Latin thing. I forget the Latin, but it means a new order for the ages.
Yeah.
They thought they were building a new order for the ages.
Yep.
There was so much optimism and so much excitement building this new country, this huge continent.
Yeah, I think that's why he loved Lincoln too.
Yeah.
Because Lincoln was a big part of that, obviously, and he has some poems. I don't remember when A Noiseless Patient Spider was written, but I know he has "Oh Captain, My Captain," which is about the death of the loss of Lincoln. And he has another one that I cannot remember what it's called, but it's about like a lily. And it's about it's somewhat long. I read it for a class a while back, and he's actually talking about the coffin that traversed America with Lincoln, right? And how he was going to contribute his one lily to it, right? And what it meant, and this tradition is a very interesting tradition of bringing the corpse around America so everyone can be a part of the man that was Lincoln and presidents.
We don't do that anymore, do we?
I don't think we do. I think we might have done it with Reagan.
Yeah.
But I remember it was a big deal. I don't know if he was the last president to die, though. So, we still have Carter, Bush Sr., Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, and who was before Carter? Reagan, right? So I can't remember exactly. It was before my
Reagan
time.
came after Carter, didn't he?
I don't think so. 81. Because I think Reagan was the 80s.
Yeah, because Carter had the hostage crisis in Iran, and Reagan came in. I'm going to take care of this.
Oh yeah, you might be right. So because that was 79, so their transition was probably 79, and then Reagan had 8 years. So we had all the way to the late 80s, and then senior came, and then anyway. I don't know if they have done that, but I remember watching like CNN. They definitely made it. Maybe that's how they've replaced that tradition, as they broadcast it. Now that we're in the modern era. But they did it with Kennedy. I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure they traveled his body.
Really?
I'm pretty sure.
I remember that. I turned on the TV one time.
Well, it was before my time, but I read about it. Is what I'm saying. So I could be wrong on that.
Maybe these days they do the broadcast commemoration memorial service. I turned on the TV and I was checking out Fox News because I like to check out all the different networks, and they're saying, and coming up is a Quranic chanting.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I got to check this out. It was Muhammad Ali's memorial service, and he had planned this out. They had imams, preachers, Jewish guys. They had people from every different faith would get up there. His wife, his daughter, and talk about Muhammad Ali, and it was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So, and that went on for 2 hours. So maybe that's the way we do it these days.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We have new technology. I don't know if it's the same thing though, because maybe it's not the ideal situation, because there's something to, like in the early 1800s when railroads were starting to grow, right? They would make a big celebration when a railroad came into town. It was a big deal.
I'll bet.
And they would, have banquets and parties and people would get married. Like, it was a big deal, right? And so there's something to, going back to the coffee shop thing and the connection. I hope we're heading back to an era where there's at least supplementing with some of the connection, right? The connection of the personal, live, like this, right? Obviously, people can watch and listen not live, which I think is a good thing, but I think we can do both now a lot easier.
I go to the cafes a lot, and one of my agenda items is to see if I can connect with somebody there. Could be a spontaneous moment, or there's a Starbucks downtown at Houston and St. Mary's.
Yeah, I know that.
This is the epicenter of downtown, and you see everything going on there. You see bike messengers, you see crazy people, you see...
You can't have a coffee shop without crazy people.
No, man. Sometimes I just sit there and watch all this and see what kind of connection can happen.
Yeah. Well, it's a very poet thing to do.
Yeah, I guess.
Right, to watch people like that. It's an artist. San Antonio is a little different than other places I've been to. So there are places where, in Denver, I think there's... When I went there, I went there in college though, so it's hard to separate, like, was it college or was it the city, right? Because I knew a lot of people. But I just remember the coffee shops had a little bit more of a connection feel. Even the baristas would talk to you more, like, than I see that happening here. It seems like the culture it's such a different culture in general. It's an obvious statement, but San Antonio and Austin is, for instance, much more like that. Like, there's a little bit more of an openness. And, San Antonio is more conservative, and not just politically, but it's just, their family values. Nothing wrong with family values, but it has a different vibe than being, liberal, being, more open, wanting to try new things and new experiences.
Yeah, I don't exactly agree with your assessment of San Antonio. I hear what you're saying. I can understand that, but my perception is a little different, actually. I lived in Austin and didn't really like it because I couldn't feel like I could make a connection with people.
Really?
Yeah. Everybody had their agenda, and you would meet somebody and it would be like, do you fit into my agenda, yes or no?
Yeah, I see.
And if it's no, it's like there was nothing to connect about.
Yeah.
But I learned something interesting about San Antonio just the other day. When the Spanish came in and took this place over, it was an invasion. Mm-hmm. They built the missions, they converted and tamed the Indians, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Those people who had been living here for generations upon generations in the Garden of Eden, what happened to them?
Yeah.
They got absorbed. By the time the missions were secularized, all of those people had Spanish surnames.
Yeah.
So San Antonio today is built on these ancient people that are still here, but they just got absorbed into the culture. But I think it made its mark on the kind of a city San Antonio is. It's a little mellower, a little smoother, a little lower key than Austin and most other big cities of this size.
So what was Austin like then? Is it a newer city in general?
Yeah, well, it had a spring too. It was one of the 7 or 4, major springs, like the Blue Hole behind the University of Incarnate Word, Comal Springs.
Okay.
And
I've never been to any of these.
Oh yeah.
San
Marcos Springs. Yeah, you can go there. Those are actually flowing. Our spring is dead most of the time.
Oh, I see.
And Barton Springs in Austin. All those were pilgrimage sites for the ancient people. But I think this was the most special one.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's a tricentennial. Yeah, are you doing anything for the tricentennial?
I'm just kind of hanging out and checking out a few events here and there.
And the Final Four is coming this year.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of stuff going on this year.
Right.
So it should be pretty big. Okay, so just, for curiosity, for a noiseless patient spider, I'm curious what do you think he's saying when he talks about the marked how to explore the vacant's vast surrounding, it launched forth filament out of itself, right? So I took that as kind of the poetic process, right? Like you look at the spider and this thing comes out of it and it creates this web, right? And so it seems like a metaphor, and I know like the what a metaphor means is basically taking you somewhere, right? So I don't know what you thought of that.
That sounds right on to me. I mean, I could totally relate to that as a writer trying to, feeling something.
Yeah.
The muse speaks to you, the angel whispers in your ear, whatever it is, you feel something and you want to share it.
Yeah.
That's what I think he's expressing there.
Yeah.
And he's looking at the spider and he's saying, well, the spider's doing the same thing. It's trying to make connections, trying to make something stick in this huge, vast world.
Yeah.
This little tiny, thin filaments, trying to make some kind of a web that will have meaning and will provide a home for him, sustenance.
Yeah.
So I can completely relate to that, that feeling that he's expressing and trying to, in a huge world, standing on a little promontory.
Yep.
Trying to make a connection.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we're doing here with the podcast?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Same thing. Filaments are just a little bit different. Yeah. But I like the writing side. I think there's something universal about writing and connecting, and to some degree even more than speaking, because like what we're doing is obviously speaking, but there's something more permanent, I guess, about writing. And even with all the media that we have today, it seems like an important, a medium that won't leave us. And he's obviously a writer, and I think he's, like the analogy or the metaphor is specific to writing in my view. I mean, obviously for him, but he's also saying, from what I'm saying, he's saying, and you owe my soul where you stand. I take that as like he's creating this thing, and which is now his soul, right? And he's speaking to you and to it, and to you owe my soul. So it's like filament. It's kind of like praising to the muses, trying to create this thing, and then now he has it. He has the book, Leaves of Grass, or what I want to say to you, right? Like you have the filaments in here. It's filled with filaments, right? And now you have it, and you're surrounded, detached, and this is a great line, in measureless oceans of space. Yeah. That's kind of what you were saying about the infinite aspect of things, right?
We live in an infinite world. We perceive it as a finite thing that conforms to our assumptions. Otherwise, it would be just too awesome to deal with.
Yeah.
But in truth, in reality, if you want to open up your mind or really try to understand something beyond your little world, it's an infinite experience being alive.
And what do you mean it's an infinite experience being alive?
Because we're in an infinite universe. And what we are as a human being, you will never finish discovering it in your lifetime. The creativity inside of you is infinite. Okay. It will keep flowing and keep changing. It will never run out. It's like, oh, that's it. It's all gone.
So let me ask you this, because that's an interesting thought. So you're saying, I think you're talking about potential, right? Like we have an infinite potential, which I agree with that. But what makes us human is the limitations, right? And that's what allows us within this measureless ocean of space to find meaning and value and enjoyment. Like we have these little filaments that are limited. They're not permanent, right? They're not forever. Even though we can go anywhere in this measureless ocean of life, right?
Well, what makes us human is both of those. The fact that we are
both
going
of
to
those,
die,
yeah.
But we do have this amazing potential at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the juxtaposition of those two things that makes being a human being kind of cool.
And I think that goes to what he's talking about, because there's a couple poems from Shakespeare that he wrote on, like, I think it's Sonnet 18, like, shall I compare thee to a summer rose, and the one he did about marriage, let's we to a marriage of true mind, or something like that. And Shakespeare talked quite a bit in his sonnets about the infinitude of poetry. And like when you want to create immortality, the only way a human can live forever is through to be remembered. Like like there's this line in Homer. It all started for me with Homer.
Really?
Yeah, the Iliad. It's fascinated me my whole life since I was 9 years old. And there's a line in there where he talks about, because the Iliad specifically is about Achilles and fate and immortality and things of that nature. And there's a line, Homer saying, would Achilles be immortal without me? Would he have accomplished his, fate that his goddess mother has given to him without me? Right. And then, would I be immortal without him? Because now Homer and Achilles are both immortal, right? And, there's a quote, either do something worth writing about or write something worth reading. And I think Theodore Roosevelt, or maybe it was Churchill, some famous, I think it was Churchill, and I love that. I think it's true. Those are the two things you can do in life. You only have two options. Either do something worth writing about or write something worth reading. Nice. And that's how I take the poetic and the writer's journey.
Have you ever read Gilgamesh?
A long time ago. Yeah, I love Gilgamesh.
Way before Homer.
Oh, yeah.
And, I really got into it. I was writing a screenplay based on Gilgamesh. And there's all different versions. There's the readable versions. There's the scholarly versions, which you can't make much sense out of.
Yeah.
But it's a fantastic story.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's poetry. It's
performance art. And that's him. Art. And what is he doing in that?
He's trying to find immortality.
He's trying to find immortality, yeah. And it's always about that. I mean, in the ancient Greek, the ancients were, of course, obsessed with that. And there's an old Hebrew saying, God is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. What does he lack? And you're like, well, he doesn't lack anything. Well, he lacks limitation, right? It's the only thing he lacks. And the idea that they had was that maybe that's, I'm actually an atheist.
That's a good one.
But I like the phrasing and how to think, the values are still important, right?
So he created human beings.
So he created human beings.
All our mistakes and all
you can see that, yeah.
Screw-ups and all our adventures.
Yeah.
And we had to struggle and learn stuff, and so that was a new deal for God.
That was a new deal for him but it really, and that's what the Gilgamesh is about. Is like, where is limitation? Same thing with, I think, even the Odyssey and especially the Iliad. That's the explicit theme, I think, of the Iliad is mortality and immortality, or death, right? And you have this grappling, and I think in this poem, A Noiseless Patient Spider, Whitman is talking a little bit about that. He's talking about the process of creating and the process of, he's creating something by observing this spider. And you, Ron, and I, Kirk, are keeping it alive 175 years or whatever later, right? And maybe 5,000 years later, if it's good enough, it'll be immortal. And so it's a kind of a confidence you have to have that you can do. Like Shakespeare said that in sonnet, whatever it was, the So I compare thee to a summer's days. He said at the end, you know, so long as men can breathe, so long as lives this, you live too. So obviously not doing it Shakespearean justice, but that's the idea, right?
Yeah, and I just thought of something. The spider is doing what it has to do. That's what it's designed for. Mm-hmm. It's compelled to fling those filaments out there and try to find a connection.
Yeah.
And for some people, I think that's their nature too. Maybe writers and artists and, I don't know, whoever else.
Creators. Yeah.
Exactly.
Entrepreneurs even, I think. Yeah. You know, I think true entrepreneurs, I have a bias. I don't like it if you get a whole bunch of like outside money. But if you start something and you you start building something, like I like Steve Jobs.
I was just going to say, Steve Jobs in his garage. They built that stuff to enable creative people to do their thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like he had, and Bill Gates gets a bad rap, but I think he did good things too. But they had this desire to build an actual thing, and they were poets in their own sense. You know, and Steve Jobs loved poetry. He loved Whitman. He loved Hawthorne. He actually was a literary person, and you could see this in his marketing campaigns. There's a literary element to it, I think. You know, I mean, there's a famous quote from him to John Scully, when he was trying to get this guy to, you know, because Steve is like 24, 5, and they have this mega $1 million corporation, and they're trying to get this big CEO from Pepsi to come run it, right? Because he's like, he was smart enough to know he was too young to do it justice, right? So he brought this guy, and his pitch to him was like, do you want to sell, sugar water, or do you want to put a dent in the universe? And, you know, just that kind of poetic phrasing is what, you know, comes from reading stuff like this and seeing the world like a creator, like a Whitman.
If you have a poetic sense, or you've read some poetry and you can express yourself with some nuance, some power, some interesting phraseology, you have a great skill.
Yeah.
It's a useful life skill.
That's the purpose of the show. Because I want people to see, that's why it's called Poets for People Who Hate Poetry. Is because I think there's a lot of people like me that grew up thinking it was useless. Thinking it was, just, you know, for dandies, or for professors, or just for females. Like, it's
intellectual elites.
Intellectual elites, right? And I'm just a salesman. My dad was a salesman. You know, I'm getting into marketing and stuff, but that's pretty much my background. My parents didn't go to college, right? They were, my mom worked for AT&T for 30 years. I never really saw them read, right? But I think poetry would have been great for their lives. It was T.S. Eliot, I'm pretty sure, I say this almost every episode, who said something also along the lines, on a deeper level, that as religion fades, poetry needs to take its place. And, you know, there's a practical
That's a
pragmatism.
hopeful statement.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, but it kind of goes to what you were saying about your grandparents, right? And like the idea, and your father, and the idea of being a preacher.
Yeah, and that's values. The thing. I wanted to put this book together and put it out as a Christmas present to my siblings, because they consider me apostate. I'm just a radical, you know, whatever you call the person who does not follow the right dogma.
Yeah.
Heretic.
Yeah.
But I feel that in another sense, I am trying to channel that spirit of the Lord, or God, or goodness, or creativity, or whatever. It's all the same thing.
Yeah. We're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Different perspectives.
And share it with people, which is what all those Baptist preachers in my family tree did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Share some inspiration, share some love, something appears to you in your mind, and it's like, wow, that is amazing. Naturally want to share it. So.
Yeah. I'm looking at some of your poems, trying to think which one to talk about in relation. I don't know if this is relevant, but I thought it was interesting to the Noise of Spider one. But I thought it was interesting, the Pain is a Reminder poem. Pain is a reminder, or a signal that you are off course. I just stubbed my toe on... I hope I'm doing you justice. I just stubbed my toe on the way back to bed. Ow, it was dark, and I didn't see the suitcase lying there. Now I'm snuggled in, thinking, maybe love is tracking us like a beacon. Where are you? Where are you? Joy is a message, too. I found you. I found you. I'm feeling love for everyone, even Donald Trump, the bugger. Even my errant brother, may love guide us all home, lying here in the dark, feeling my own breath. So I wrote next to that one Spider Poem. It seemed there was some relation. Like you have the pictures of suitcases, but you stubbed your toe on it. So I take it, for me, I see you wanting to travel more, but you don't, or something like that, right? But there's an element to me of, you're trying to put something out into the world, and you just stubbed your toe on it, or something, right? And there's some element to that. I don't know what you were going for. If you want to elaborate or tell me,
And I was on my way back to the bed, and I stubbed my toe, and it hurt, and I laid down in the bed. I carry my phone with me in case I need to record a thought. And I was lying there in the bed, and this just started coming to me, like, wow, it's from the pain that we learn stuff. And what we learn is that we need to feel love and share love. And that was kind of the thought process that was going through my brain after I stubbed my toe.
So the suitcase doesn't mean much.
No.
It's more literal. That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. But it's a reminder, the pain is what's important in this case.
Yeah. But when you read a poem, who's to say what it means? The guy who wrote it?
Yeah.
They may not know what it means. Yeah. I have written many poems and then looked at them months later and go, oh, I get it. Well, or it may not even be my poem, but maybe somebody else's poem that understands what that's about.
Yeah, and part of what... So I agree with that completely. I always say that when we're reading it, what the author's intentions are, what their desires were, really isn't relevant. And it's part in terms of... It might help guide you in thinking about it, but the purpose of poetry is the process of reading. The purpose of reading poetry is the process, which is why I call what we're doing with these poems, I call it converse with verse, right? And it's the idea of having a conversation. So when we have a conversation, we may have a lot of aims in the moment. Like psychologists and negotiators actually have broken these down a lot. Like if you see two people talking, you can, one's trying to front, right? One's trying to play it small. One feels belittled. One wants to push down the other guy. One wants to build himself up with the story he's telling, right? He's trying. So there's a million little things that we're always trying to do, but that's what conversation is, right? And that's the discourse of it, and it has those terminology and the idea. And it's the same thing with poetry, and it's the purpose of the show. It's trying to understand that the thing people don't like about poetry, that I never liked about it, was that it seemed to not have a purpose, right? Like if I'm a salesperson, I'm selling knives. I sell Cutco. It's like, well, a knife has a specific purpose. It's very simple. You cut things with it, right? It's very basic. Well, what the hell do you use poetry for? Like, what is it good for, right? And it's the challenge poetry has always had. And some of the conclusions I've come to a lot doing this with people and just exploring it, is it teaches you, one, what it means to be, it teaches you the process of thought, which is a difficult, rigorous thing that people underestimate. So if you want to be a better thinker, you need to read more poetry. But, there's metaphors, there's analogies, there's using language, connotation, denotation. So there's the specific material of it, that you put in the pot, right? And then you kind of stew something and figure it out. And then there's also, training you in practical skills like rhetoric, right? Advertising and marketing and sales. If you use words to convey your thoughts and you want someone to take an action,
you use the right word.
Use the right words. It helps.
The word that works the best.
The words, the
That's
perfect
powerful.
word.
Even if you're trying to, even if it's copywriting and you're trying to sell somebody something.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. Well, you look at Obama was a great rhetorician. I don't always agree with everything he said. I don't think I've agreed with the president ever, but I'm very anti-everything presidents. But he was a good rhetorical person, and he used language better than most recent presidents, put it that way. And, I don't know his background enough, but I'm pretty sure he had some kind of formal training in literature, poetry, or some kind of experience with that, right? You could tell, whatever you want to say of Trump or Bush, Jr., that they weren't, the most literary people in general. And so they suffered rhetorically to some degree, right? Yeah. But they don't have the eloquence that Obama has.
And maybe that has to do with the way your brain is wired too. I mean, maybe some people are mathematicians because they like hard facts and logic, and other people are poets because they like the resonance of words and going beyond the logic into a feeling.
Yeah.
And that's how they do it.
Well, no, I agree. And I do think we have, personally, I think we have like natural abilities. So just like, you know, you're a tall guy, you have you have the naturalness of tallness, right? Like it just happened, part of you. And if you know, LeBron James is naturally tall. You're not going to get to the level of a LeBron James without at least having that innateness to you. But there's still a lot of, going back to what you said earlier, potential to expand and improve for anybody. So even if you're only 6'1" and you're not 6'7" or whatever, 6'9", whatever LeBron is, I don't think he's that tall, but he's tall.
He
is he 6'9"?
Yeah, he's 6'9", something like
yeah,
that.
He's a beast.
He's a big boy.
Yeah, so like even if you're not there at that height, you can still get, maybe you won't make it to the NBA, but you can still make it to your local team and play better, right? And it's the same thing with poetry. Like, even if you're a very hard-line, factual person, which I think I'm pretty analytical, like, I think I have that, but, you know, and there are people who are more than me on that for sure. Like, reading a little bit of poetry, I don't think everyone needs to turn into a friggin' poet, right? I think they need to add a little bit of poetry to their life. That's the purpose.
That would be sweet.
That's it.
To facilitate the connection between people, to find some frequency that we can all groove on.
Yeah.
Creativity doesn't have an opinion. It's not political. It's not issue-oriented.
Yeah.
It's just a flow of energy.
Yeah.
It's just something that comes from somewhere and wants to connect.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it would be great if people were more into poetry or any art form where we can feel some connection.
Yeah.
E pluribus unum, y'all. From one many.
From one many.
It's on the dollar bill.
Yeah.
What about that?
Yeah. What is it? E pluribus unum. I just heard this the other day. I forgot. I like that. That's a great one. And it's, what does it stand for again? From one many?
From many.
From many.
One. E pluribus.
What do you think that means?
When they started this country, there's people from all over the place coming together.
Melting pot?
Melting pot.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it was, and they saw that. This is a strength. This will make this country amazing, to take all these people from all these different countries, different cultural backgrounds, different ideas, different languages, different ways of thinking, and put them all in one country and build something. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
They were right.
They were right, and then now it's, but there's a lot of challenges.
Now it's kind of falling in on itself. It's like...
Well, but there's a lot of challenges to it, even in the beginning, right? Like there's never been easy. Like to some degree, it may be easier when you have all one type of person or like, one race and they have very similar thoughts.
To do what?
To build a society that doesn't implode on itself. I don't know.
I don't agree.
Okay, fair.
Well, it's the Nazi thing, we just want white Aryans here, and we're going to build a super society and a super race. That didn't work out. Yeah.
No, I don't think it's right. I'm saying like what we have today and what we've had for a long time, and we always have civil unrest, we always have massive disagreements, we all, like today where it's coming to the point, for instance, with gun control, where people are literally on both sides. This is one issue I've been following a lot lately. On both sides are literally saying about the other side that they don't care that children are dying. Like, where it's getting that politicized, which is why, I like the poetry angle, because it kind of gives you, an ability to approach. Did you need this?
Oh, I just wanted to borrow a pen. Do you have a pen over there?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I'm sometimes wondering, I'll just be honest, sometimes there's a desire for me to, like, go through the thought process. I don't know if I have a solid view on this. I think America's amazing because of the E pluribus unum idea, many in one, which I think means what you're saying, but I think it also means, organizing a society around an organizing principle. So I also take it as multiple things. Like, all these people are attracted to one particular principle of liberty. Like, that's an important idea that, they came here to give us your huddled masses and, give us your poor, your hungry, your huddled masses. But really what they were giving were the people who fled from oppression to liberty. And that's what we always were supposed to be about. I don't think we've always honored that principle, but I think we are supposed to be about that.
Yeah, if we could
Mother of exiles.
If we could keep our principles in focus and learn how to communicate with each other, speak to each other, and listen with respect, that dream could still be alive. If you look at planet Earth and all the life forms on this planet, it's all based on biodiversity. We would not be here if there was just one species that started out on planet Earth. It had to have all the different species, all evolving, all working together symbiotically to build the environment, to build the air environment, to build the jungles and seas and all this stuff. Because there is the diversity, we have life on this planet. Yeah.
And so you're saying that translates to the diversity of America and what makes...
It's a strength.
Yeah, the strength of America. Yeah, I definitely think it's the strength. I guess I'm curious, just personally, I'm always wondering about how people interact in our country and what has led to some of the problems we have, in terms of like this kind of thing of a noiseless patient spider where he's connecting, like you said. But we're not doing that anymore.
It's become so divisive. I mean, divisiveness has become an art form.
Yeah.
I won't name the networks or the talk show hosts.
Oh, you can.
But these guys have made, Rush Limbaugh and Fox News and Laura Ingraham and all these people, they've made a career out of being intentionally divisive. So people watch that stuff every day and they become completely divisive in their thinking. It's me and them.
Yeah.
Separate into us versus them. And the issues are all separated into conservative versus liberal and Republican versus Democrat.
Yeah.
Well, the issues never get solved because nobody's actually looking for the solution. They're just arguing with each other because we have become so divisive. It's a sickness, it's a disease, and it doesn't bode well for it.
It doesn't.
What did Abraham Lincoln say? Something about divided we fall.
Yeah.
Hey, divided we fall. How much more divided? The Congress can't even do anything. They can't get past their divisiveness. They're supposed to, come together, right? Congress, doesn't that mean coming together?
Yeah.
And, work stuff out, compromise, find solutions. They're just like paralyzed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. I think I think it's also on both sides, though. I don't think it's merely, the Rush Limbaugh, fanatics who... or Alex Jones, if you know Alex Jones at all, the crazy guy. I think they make a living doing it, but it seems like it happens on both sides. And for me, what I've seen is, and this is why I'm interested in the converse idea, discourse, and how can we start teaching young people how to do that, and how can we start teaching, even if you're not young, how to do it, and it's challenging. It's really, really hard. Even if you're a very open person, how do you keep your sacred principles and values in the face of someone who disagrees vehemently with your fundamental principles? Right. It's a challenge, and it's to not respect it is a mistake.
I think we need to relearn communication skills. We're very proud of our language skills. We got languages. We got 1 million words in the English language.
Yeah.
Oh, we're great at talking.
Yeah.
But we have forgotten the simplest language of all, which is symbiosis. Every cell in our body is talking to all the other cells, and the microbiota in our gut is talking to our human cells, and they're all working together in symbiosis. And that's the language that we have forgotten. How to support each other, give and take, listen as well as talk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you think you do that? How do you think you improve, even in just San Antonio?
By self-reflection and identifying your own humanity. If you can feel what being human is all about, what are your deepest desires, your deepest urges? What are the finest moments of your life? What do you know? And then realize that humanity is shared by everybody. They are not different from you on that level. So then the divisiveness is not important anymore. You can see them as another human being the same as you.
So, I mean, that's the ideal, what you want people to achieve. I guess the challenge is, how do you affect behavioral change in people?
I think that's where it starts. People have to go through some kind of self-reflection process. They have to have some kind of self-knowledge, because you can't legislate it.
Yeah.
You can't force people to do it. You can't teach it to people if they're not willing to learn. It has to come from inside of us somehow. It has to start somewhere.
Did we as let's put it this way? Did we as humans ever have that in society ever? Well, that was an important part of our culture.
I think every culture in its formative phase had that. But by the time they got to the classic phase, when they're building all these monuments that the archaeologists have dug up, they were in decline.
Oh, interesting.
Who built those monuments? Not the rich people, the slaves.
The slaves, the labor.
The labor.
Yeah. Okay.
And we're the labor now, and we're building the monuments to the rich elite that are running the country.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. No, I'm just curious, like, how, I mean, I see what you're saying. I'm trying to, like, flesh out the communication and how do you, because it's hard to get people to reflect, to honestly reflect. Like, if I'm honest with myself, it's hard for me to honestly reflect. It's not an easy process.
Take some time. Sit down in a groovy spot next to a river or a creek or on your couch. Just sit down there. Now close your eyes or just feel yourself. See what you discover.
Yeah.
Thoughts will roll through your mind. Inspect them. Let them go. And just feel. Just feel.
So how do you think that's different than driving in a car, turning off the, music and just thinking? Because that's what most people do a lot. People do a lot of things in their head, right, are often going on.
Yeah, David Byrne made the comment that expressways are the cathedrals of our time. Because you sit in your little car, you're in the sanctuary, and maybe the pigeons are angels, I don't know. But there you are in seclusion, and that's where you do actually have a lot of deep thoughts.
Yep. Yeah, you do have thoughts there, but I'm trying to be honest about how difficult it is for me to reflect. Like, for instance, if I would just sit down, like, I think a lot. And when I think about what I think about, I don't know if you've ever done that. Like, if you ever, like, as a writer, you probably have. A lot of people aren't writers. So, when I try to sit into their point of view, right, and they're not a noiseless, patient spider. They're not patient. They're not noiseless, right? They're very noisy. You gonna say something?
You were born.
Okay.
You were given life.
Yes.
You didn't earn it. You didn't create it. You just kind of popped out and you took a breath. You took an inhalation because there was nothing inside of you. And in that moment, you became alive. You no longer needed the umbilical cord to your mother.
Yes.
Now we're in our lifetime. It's a lifespan. At the end of it will be an exhalation. You'll let it out, but it will not come back in again.
Yeah.
So that's something to start with. I'm having a lifetime, and it's a gift. It's a gift. It's being given to me.
Yeah.
Do I appreciate it? How much do I appreciate it? How much beauty do I see here? How much wonder and just amazing stuff can I feel?
How do you snap people out of it, though? So I know, I agree totally with what you're going for. I think it's an important process, but my experience with people is that you can't just tell them to go do that.
I know, if they're drunk on money.
Yeah.
It's a great,
it seems like they have to get hit by a car. Something tragic has to happen to them, right? That's the only time they get divorced and they're like, and I never saw it coming. And whenever people say stuff like that, I'm like, you fucking nuts? Like, I've been watching you for a year. I've seen it coming. How could you not? Like, when things, I never saw it coming, I got fired. Well, you were shitty at your job for a long time, and you didn't come up to work, and you were drunk a lot. How did you not see it come? So what I mean is, like, people seem to get into this groove, and we're just talking normal people, right? Like, I think you and I are a little bit different as writers. So the challenge of a writer is to get into the head, of people who aren't writers. And maybe the solution is we get better at teaching people how to write more often. Maybe, we need to start a movement of journaling more often. That's it. Like, you don't have to be a professional writer. But what I'm saying is, like, people need to get punched in the soul.
Isn't it true, though, that it's our traumas and our disasters and our most painful experiences that create who we are, that create our best qualities, because we learn stuff when that happens. We never would have learned otherwise, because we didn't want to go there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, like, when you read all the different religions, and I haven't done that, but there's Richard Shell wrote a book called Springboard: Launching Your Personal Search for Success, and it's a self-help book, but it's also, or self-development, whatever you want to call it, but he actually does, he's a philosopher, a professor of business at Wharton School. And he does,
School of Business?
Yeah, I think it's Wharton. But it's a top, school, and he does a survey of all the different philosophies of how to live, essentially, and religions and all of them. He does like this survey, and he helps guide you through understanding the different perspectives. And one of the conclusions, he and many other people who've done this, like Joseph Campbell's and all those guys who've done, one of the conclusions they came to is wisdom comes from suffering, not from smiles. Right? And so the question is, how do we inculcate more wisdom into a 350 million person society that is focused on now, which is one of our strengths and probably one of our weaknesses. I think de Tocqueville said that one of the things that and this is Whitman too, he always talks in present tense. It's one of his famous things, is he's very often in present tense. And it's one of the things that makes America American, I think, is that we are not obsessed with the past, which Europe still is. They're obsessed with, like for instance, old money is better than new money, which is ridiculous when you think about it. America is more about now and creating something and maybe even the future. But the downside of that is you might lose wisdom, which I think too, de Tocqueville said is a problem. You're not, I think Americans live in an ahistorical bubble. Like, they don't understand that, for instance, we could fail. Like, that, they don't feel like the history is real. They feel like it's something that happened, but it could never happen here, right? Like, nothing bad can happen here, really. Which is why when you have, terrorist attack, it's a shock. It really destroys the system.
But we are a city on a hill, but we are blessed by God. We are the new order of the ages.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm talking into this mic right.
Oh, it sounds good.
It sounds
good. I think you're good.
What I was going to say was, I've been performing a lot, doing my hip-hop rap thing, and there's a lot of open mics around town. There's a strong literary tradition in San Antonio where people can get up there and do their thing.
Yeah.
Or they can just come and enjoy and listen to people expressing. I guess maybe it's analogous to some people go to church on Sunday morning and they listen to the sermon and they convive with their friends.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's encouraging to me to see a lot of
That's good.
poetry happening and people expressing themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it's the next step. Now, were there any of your poems you wanted to talk about in relation to this? I chose, the Pain as a Reminder. Maybe there's one you liked more.
There was one, I was thinking about that. Is he going to ask me, is there a poem you'd like to share? And the one that came up to me is called it's kind of the whole issue of war, which we have not escaped the scourge of with all of our, modern society. We have just mechanized it and reduced it to it's number 14, to a distant thing instead of being up close and personal. And that's what this poem was about. I thought it was kind of cool.
All right, you want to read it?
Yeah, I'd
love to hear it. I did read that one.
You did?
I did. God, what grievous wounds
they must have sustained back in the olden days, fighting wars with swords, cuts and lacerations, bleeding profusely or punctured clear through to the bone, the blade searching for vital organs before exiting, returning to its master in defense of life and liberty, or whatever the cause was. It must have been something else, something slower and more realistic. You could say something while you were being slaughtered or slaughtering, insult their mother's honor, or some horrific allusion to horses in the bedroom. Why not? Some kind of seminal moment for everyone. And what about those who made it home with only one hand or one hip? How did they plow the fields? How did they write poetry? What did they know?
Nice. So, that's the idea being, and the because it has a very what struck me first was
if we had to fight like they did in the olden days,
Yes.
there would be less wars. The king had to go out in front,
yeah,
right, lead the charge with his sword on his horse.
yeah.
If we still did it that way, I would be okay with that, more or less.
Yeah, Trump was.
But
on
now we
horse.
got somebody sitting in a computer console in Houston, and they're launching a Hellfire missile off a drone in Pakistan, blowing up a house full of people. They don't know who they are or what they're about or anything. I mean, it's so impersonal.
Yeah.
War is horrible in any way, but the way we do it these days, I think, is I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, what I was trying to, I mean, I saw all of that, and I figured there was the idea of, God, what grievous wounds. So I like that how you started with this, appeal to God or appeal to physical reality. Sometimes people think of God as like all of reality or something, but or I do anyway. I don't know if other people do too much, but so it's like they must have had grievous wound, sustained.
Those swords were like long, sharp. Yeah. And the idea was to stick it in somebody.
Yeah, well, and what I have thought about this too, like even when you watch movies about this, like how terrifying it would be to charge at somebody and look them in the eye as they screamed bloody murder and wanted to, brutalize your soul, your body, right? That was their goal. And that now, even in Vietnam or something, everything was hidden and people were shooting, but that was still more personal, I think, than what you're saying, which is even moving beyond that, where it's, oftentimes people in hills and we're bombing them from afar, or they're doing what you're talking about, where it's drones, or just moving, we're just separating more and more. So we're kind of separating from the consequences personally to us, is what it feels like.
Easy to make war. And we got a whole industry called the military-industrial complex that makes big bucks when they sell those Hellfire missiles, cruise missiles, anti-aircraft carriers, and everything else.
Yeah.
And something else. All those weapons that the federal government has got, all those billions and billions of dollars that they're using to fight terrorists over there.
Yeah.
One day they might be over your neighborhood. The helicopters, the gunships, the drones. Could happen. Scary thought.
Well, it's definitely already happened. I mean, it happened even under Obama, where remember there was that big case in like 2011 or something where they're talking about a civilian. There's one where like a civilian.
They were in a foreign country.
Well, there was one in a civilian foreign country, but then there's one with like a criminal here in America. Yeah. So that where they use this. I don't know if they took them out, but they might have. But the idea, there was still this issue of how do we use this at home, right? We're like. Because it's do we use military war, like you're saying? The question came up, is the idea. And then, yes, abroad it's a different question. But, I guess the question I have is like, so, well, one, I wanted to approach it because this is a lot of your poetry, and I wanted to ask you about this. It has no punctuation. And
what do you need punctuation for?
Well, I'm asking, I have a particular view, but I'm curious.
I don't like those little things all over the page telling you what to do. I just like to...
That's what I was going to... Okay.
In the ancient Roman inscriptions, we used to chisel it in the rock.
Yeah.
They had no punctuation. They had no spaces between the words.
Yeah. Have you ever seen one? Like, because it actually goes like this. Yeah. The way they wrote. Because it's more natural to go like that than to go like this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like, they actually... It was like a swirly thing. And yeah, they didn't have any spaces. No, they did get to a point where they put a breath mark, right? Where they had this little mark that said to breathe here, essentially. That's what the origins of commas are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's like a little breath mark. But I was just curious because like it's especially this one particularly, like it comes out as one breath, right? For me, it seems like it feels like it comes out in one breath, and the poem itself, like the theme, made me think of Dulce et decorum est. It's a famous poem. Owens? I can't remember who wrote it. I'm sorry, but it's a famous war poem about World War I, and it's this idea about the grievousness of war and what is the because he's attacking. This is an actual soldier who would die very quick shortly after he wrote this poem. Actually. So if you look at Dulce et decorum est, very famous World War I poem, and it's about this guy who they get hit by a gas bomb.
Poison gas.
Poison gas. And he describes it as like, he's comparing it to like the bright soldiers you see on propaganda posters at this time. It's like this war is fun and beautiful and amazing, and you have
marching to save the homeland.
And the way he describes it is like they're half stooped because they're so exhausted. You know, they're walking and they have these masks around their necks and they're just exhausted beyond all belief. And, you know, they haven't slept for a week or something. And then what happens is this bomb comes and this guy is so tired he can't get his mask on in time. And so he, you know, then the poet describes the brutal gurgling, and he does it in very vivid details. And his whole idea is, you know, Dulce et decorum est, something like, I can't remember the exact translation, but it's something like, you know, how good it is to, you know, how sweet and noble it is to die for your country.
That's what the poet said?
That's what it started. And then he ends with et
how fucked up it is to die at all. Well, it's poison gas in your lungs.
It's ironic. He's going for irony. Yeah, I mean that's basically because what he's going for is irony. He's saying, because he draws this picture of, is this noble to like die in this way? Like this guy was, because it's so pitiful. He's so, you know, and so that's what yours. And now that is not personal, by the way. So yours is kind of talking about the personality of war. He's talking about the propaganda and the irony of nobility in war, which I think is kind of related to what you're talking about. Like, are you saying it's more noble to be more personal? That's what I guess.
I'm saying it would cause more self-reflection, shall you say? Is this really worth it? Do we really want to do this?
Yeah.
Just pushing buttons, dropping bombs, shooting people from far away. That's too easy. If you want to kill somebody, you should have to work for it. You should have to look them in the eye and listen to them scream and die.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Well, so do you think there are more... I mean, the poem definitely, you know, was very poignant, your poem. So I'm curious, though, you know, with the theme there, do you think there are more... killings in the past or today in war?
I don't know. I mean,
because the flip side to what you're saying, I think, is that because we can do that, we actually kill less. Like, we don't have to have... So, for instance, one of, like, Chuck Palahniuk guy, the Fight Club guy, who wrote Fight Club book, like, his whole thing, and I've heard this actually quite a bit, is, like, one of the reasons we have, like, mass shooters is, in the past, people like that would have an outlet.
Yeah.
Right? And we don't have that as much anymore. So that's the flip side of what you're... So, actually, that's in agreement with what you're saying. So, like, if we had more of that personal, they could join the military and be on the front lines of this brutal thing called war, right? Well, but I don't know, like, so there's... I guess I confused myself. There's two different issues there, but I don't know if you're following me at all here.
I read something that this guy said that the amount of wars and people getting killed in wars is going down and down and down back from the olden days.
Yeah.
And what was my point? Yeah, and I think the amount of violent hostility we have to other people. I mean, people that grew up in the Balkans, the person in the next door town could be completely the other that you would have a combative relationship with. I think we've overcome a lot of that. We've become more global.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, if you're a Catholic and I'm a Christian, it's not really a big deal. Back in the day, they used to kill each other about that.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
You're Catholic, man, you're going down.
Yeah.
You're the wrong side of history. So, you know, we've kind of overcome a lot of that.
So there's two sides to it. And obviously a poem is, you know, it's a good poem because it's so specific, right? Like this poem, God But Grievous Wounds, is making a very specific point that we would look at war differently if we had to carry a sword into battle than if we had to push a button.
What kind of self-reflection did that guy go through who pushed that button on that drone sitting in Houston?
You had to have more moral fortitude. Yeah.
Yeah.
You had to have more moral fortitude for sure, which is why they would send priests and preachers into war more. Yeah. Right? Like now they do it still as far, you know, they're still preachers, but they also send lawyers today, which is weird. You know, because there's a lot of rules in law that there wasn't back, or in war, that there wasn't hundreds of years ago. In the past, it was just kill or be killed, right? But anyway, so my point is that you had to, like, if there's a poem called The Song of Rostand, or I believe that's what it is, very famous, like, romantic war poem. It was a medieval time type poem, and it was like a ballad. And the Pope, at one point, there's this phrase where he's talking to the soldiers, and he's giving them, and he's saying, go to the Muslim, cut them in half, spill their, it's very moral, like, you are right and they are the devil.
Save the holy city.
Save the holy city. And it's very moral, and because you have to do that when you're holding a sword like that. You have to have a strong conviction in what you're doing. So this is where I would agree 100% with what you're saying, because I'm curious about this. I've never been to war. I hope I've never have to go to war. And I never joined the military, and I almost did, but I chose not to. I respect people who do, but one thing in talking to them as an outsider versus reading about people that you're talking about 500 years ago who held a sword is that I don't often see the moral conviction in the war. So in the past, when you're going to the holy war, or you're defending your town from the evil king, or you're fighting for your particular boss, whatever it is, there seemed to be like you fought for your life, in a sense. That moral certitude is there, where now you're disconnected from it, right? Like, did you see American Sniper? Clint Eastwood movie? So there's a moment where he's in this hellish war, and then he comes home and sees all these McDonald's and stuff like that. And it's like, which is like,
this is what I was fighting for.
Yeah, and it's like, but it just seems so distant. It's like, why, like, why? He doesn't say this because, he's not a talkative man, but why, like, the feeling definitely was presented. Mm-hmm. Like, what the hell is the purpose? They're not going to come here and take my McDonald's? Like, what is it really for, right? Except for the fighting. And then the conclusion, this is my last thought, the conclusion that they seem to come to today, more, like, it was always the conclusion, but it seems to be the only thing, is the brotherhood. They only fight for each other, which is, I understand that, you fight for the man next to you. But, going to your point in this poem, we seem to have lost the moral certitude and the fight, if we're going to choose to fight.
I think we've lost the moral certitude. That's my conclusion. What are we doing in Afghanistan after 12 years?
17.
17
We've been there freaking longer than Vietnam, man.
We're fighting
it's crazy.
To maintain the hegemony of the American empire and to support the military-industrial complex. That's what we're fighting for.
Yeah, and I can't say anything to that, but I don't know why the hell we're there anymore. Yeah, I agree with that.
17 years?
It's something like, maybe longer. We've been there longer than Vietnam. Yeah. And it's like an endless, it's basically just an occupation at this point, but it's...
and how do you think that war's getting in? You got foreign American soldiers in there, all geared up. Yeah. They're completely from another religion, another culture, and they're in your country. How do you think that war's ever going to stop? People are going to be... Look what happened to the Soviets. They tried to take it over. Yeah. And we actually, back in those times, that was Reagan's era, we armed the Mujahideen to fight the Soviets on our behalf. Well, they became then the Taliban and Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
But they're not going to stop fighting as long as foreigners are walking around their country, would you?
No. Yeah. No, it's not. I mean, it's the fighting in the way that they're fighting it, and where they're fighting it, and why they're fighting it today, America, why we're fighting it. I mean, we have to say we, because we're a part of it, even if we're not there. We're
paying our taxes.
Paying our taxes. Yeah, that's why you have to get involved, and you have to get interested, because when the government does something, even if you're not doing it, you're part of it, right? You're privy. Which was an ancient concept a lot too, this idea that the whole city went to war, right? And so in the past, there was never a separation, or there was often not a separation between civilian and soldier. If you were part of the city, you were part of the society, and you were subject to whatever your society did. Now, we today have separated that view, and we've said civilian and military men are two completely different things, which is probably somewhat related to this. Like, the same disconnection where, because the reality is that we are culpable for what America does abroad, right? Like, we're part of the system. We help feed the soldiers, we help provide soldiers, we give them moral support, we give them letters, we give them, support the troops packages, we pay taxes, which go out there. So we support it in some way or fashion, right? So.
Check this out.
Sure.
Next to God, What Grievous Wounds, is a poem called Jerusalem.
I like that, yes.
City of peace, shalom, salam, salem. Someone had a peak experience up there on top of that hill one day. Of course, one man's epiphany is another man's religion. After King David captured it from the Canaanites in 1026 BC and made it his capital in Mount Zion, which was the fortified part of the old pagan sanctuary, became the symbol of the kingdom of Israel, such as it was back then, stuck between 3 or 4 major giant empires, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans. Everybody wanted a piece of that pie. And the house of David and Solomon going way back to when they tried to have their own empire, but it can never last. It's so annoying. And anyways, here we are, Jerusalem, calling out your name. City of peace. Restore the magic that was lost. City of peace, Jerusalem. Restore the time when we were neighbors and friends, when Jerusalem was just a little hill in the wilderness and we could sit there and feel peace.
Yeah, that's lovely. Why did you write that one?
I was, I don't know, I guess reflecting on current events. I actually found myself, I was driving somewhere and got lost. You ended up in an Arabic cafe somewhere on the west side of San Antonio, and you know, finished writing that poem there. It was just circulating in my brain. Jerusalem, that's what the word means. City of peace.
City of peace. Yep.
How ironic.
I know. Yeah, and it's been, well, that's kind of the idea though of why, I mean, the irony, a lot of people have written about this. I don't know if you know the William Blake poem, New Jerusalem. Have you heard of that?
Well, I've heard about it. I can't say I'm that familiar with it. You gonna call it up?
I'm looking for it, but it's a lovely little poem. He actually takes a slightly different perspective on it, because the New Jerusalem, the concept is after you get the end of days, you're supposed to there's supposed to be the chosen ones go to the New Jerusalem, and they're called. That's where they sit with the city.
So it's kind of a biblical perspective.
Yes. So let's see. I think this is it. So it goes, England, I awake, awake, awake. Jerusalem, my sister calls. Why wilt thou sleep the sleep of death, and close her from thy ancient walls? Oh, actually, that's, I'm going to skip to the second stanza, actually, second start. And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountain green? And was the holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pasture seen? And did the countenance divine shine forth upon our clouded hills? And was Jerusalem builded here among these dark satanic mills? Bring me my bow of burning gold. Bring me my arrows of desire. Bring me my spear, O clouds unfold. Bring me my chariot of fire. That's where that comes from. I will not cease my mental fight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land.
Nice.
Yeah, and so
that's Blake. Huh?
That's William Blake. Yeah, I love that poem because so you're talking about in your Jerusalem. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been wrong a lot. Is you're kind of reflecting on the idea
the origin.
The origin
Where did
of
this
the word
start from?
Yeah.
Where did we come from, people?
Yes.
Look at where we're at now, but Yanawana, the river that is the reason we have a city called San Antonio with a river walk. The native people called it Yanawana.
Yeah.
Yanawana means peaceful waters.
Yeah.
What was that about?
Yeah. Yeah, and having that peace and where do we go wrong to lead us to where we are today, Right?
Now you can sit at Starbucks in downtown Houston and St. Mary's, like you don't see no peaceful waters anymore. You see crazy, hubbub, hubris, cars rushing by, all kinds of crazy stuff.
A lot of crazy stuff, yeah. And things change, and also, sometimes reflecting on it can maybe be a piece in itself, right? Like be a piece in itself. Now,
realize, listen, every human being has this source of peace inside of them. Like the whole history of humanity, like Gilgamesh or the Iliad, it's the story of each one of us.
Yeah.
So again, to remind ourselves that inside of us is peace, hope, love, infinite amounts of appreciation, because it's endless. I mean, maybe that's the wrong word to use because it sounds, like too much. But you never run out of that stuff.
Yeah.
So here
endless
we are.
Potential, like we said earlier, right?
Potential.
Yeah.
Here we are, all sophisticated and civilized. But our origins, we started out that innocent little sweet baby. Yeah. That would charm anybody with that smile.
Innocent sweet baby, that's right. There are a couple ugly babies, though.
Yeah, you've seen an ugly baby? I never have.
You've never seen an ugly baby?
I don't think so.
Okay, so you think babies innately are just beautiful?
Yeah, I think nature designed it that way so they would be nurtured. They wouldn't be abandoned, if the tribe had to rush off.
Well, you're beautiful to yourself, but I mean, there's that. I mean, I'm just being flippant, but the Seinfeld episode. Have you seen Seinfeld?
Yeah.
So there's that episode where everyone, goes to see their, this baby, and it's the world's ugliest baby, and they're all just, and then they have to pretend like it's a beautiful baby.
Oh, do you see the baby?
You never see the baby.
Yeah. I don't think they're ugly babies.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, it could be deformed. It could have something physically
wrong
with it.
That's definitely something. But anyway, so that's what you're saying about the peace. You're reflecting on peace, and you're even reflecting on the Canaanites in 1026 BC. And made it his capital. So kind of the history of this.
Yeah, it was a pagan sanctuary before King David took it over. There was something there. Maybe there was a spring. Maybe there was a grove of trees. Maybe there was a nice view. Something made it special, and the Canaanites, in their pagan religion, set up a sanctuary there.
Yeah.
The Israelites took it over and made it their own sanctuary, which then became Jerusalem. Yeah. But the whole point is that at the origin, at the source of all civilizations and every human being, is this beautiful, beautiful thing of, call it whatever you want, It's what we're all searching for to get back to. Yeah. So it's there. It's not like it's not there. We just have to invert or reverse or go back or appreciate something simple again. Yep. That's what I'm trying to get at in my preaching voice.
No, I got what you're saying, and I think William Blake is preaching in a different way. I like to compare poems. It helps me comprehend both better. So he's kind of, talking about peace because he talks about Jerusalem in the same kind of way, and he's asking the question, Jerusalem as an idea, for instance, and you're taking Jerusalem in this case as the place, and how did it get to where it came? And when you think about, well, how did it get to the place of the fall of empires and wars all the time? Well, it was started off as a place of peace. It started off as
just a groovy spot, man. Just a groovy spot. Shepherds would hang out there and just groove out.
That's right. Yeah, shepherds would groove out. Shepherds would groove out. And Jesus was buried there, though, 1,000 years before the canon, before you're saying. Oh, no, that's 126 BC. I see. So yeah, this is a little bit before Jesus. So anyway, I was thinking 127 AD, my bad. But anyway, so you're reflecting on the origins of it, and often when you reflect on the origins of something, it can bring clarity to your present.
Yes, I think so. I think it's an important process. I mean, we're so future-oriented, and we're so object-oriented, we're so agenda-oriented. The whole purpose of life is to get a lot of money, right?
Well,
doesn't that bring us happiness?
Yes, I see what you're saying. That's the model we're told.
Yes, that's the predominant paradigm that society operates on. Yeah. But it's a false paradigm. It doesn't really bring us fulfillment. It just brings us desire for more.
For more, yeah.
But if we could somehow realize that we already have a form of wealth within us innately, and to, check that out.
Do you know? Okay, so the form of, there's something innate in us that can bring happiness. Yeah. And the search for money often
is a distraction.
Distracts you.
Not only are we destroying our planet, creating wealth, it's a distraction from what the real journey is about, which is back to ourselves. Mm-hmm. Once you've got that peace or that self-knowledge or whatever, then you can do whatever you want, because you will be doing it responsibly and you'll already be happy. You're not going to be doing it from a greedy motive. Yeah. You're going to be doing it from a generous motive, because you already have what you need.
Yeah, so that's kind of the bulwark of the soul mentality, right? Where you're saying that your soul has certain innate abilities to find happiness.
I thought you were an atheist.
I am an atheist.
Do you believe in the soul?
Not the eternal. I don't believe the soul is like a Casper when you die, but I believe the soul is the sum of all of your characteristics. Yeah. So everyone's an individual. So to me, soul is just a term we've come up with that I think is a great term, and I don't care that it's from religion. That doesn't bother me or anything, but it's how we identify the unique attributes of this individual, and we say that it's their soul. Like that person has soul, or so that's all I mean by that. But you're saying that there's this bulwark of this internal soul that we have that makes us who we are.
There's something there. Everybody knows it if you stop and think about it. I mean, God and soul and this kind of stuff are things, love, that you actually cannot talk about because the words do not match up with reality. But we use words because we like to talk about stuff. But these are things that you can only feel in your own unique way and know somehow within yourself.
Well, but this is the role of poetry, though.
Yeah.
So you can know it yourself, but the problem with phrasing it like that. So let me just talk like a marketer, a salesperson, right? It's like, it's vague to the point of being unhelpful to a non-literary person. So like there's this Marxist phrase, to those who understand, to those who know, no explanation is necessary, to those who don't, none is possible. And the problem with that is that you definitely separate, like people are different. And like you were saying, some people are engineers. And so the question is, how do you help bridge the gap so that people who don't approach life the way that you do, we wouldn't have a Steve Jobs if there wasn't somebody who knew how to build the hardware ahead of him, right? You have to, the symbiosis need that. And so the question is then, how do you speak to each other? What language do you use? And to me, a good poet does that. A good poet helps to bridge the gap to both, to different people and to bring, and the way they do it is by concrete language in a material way within a given context with a rhythm of some sort, some kind of meaning they're trying to get across. As some poets said, men speaking to men. And this is 100 years ago, but like that's what. But they're speaking to them in emotional language, in a way that gives me now the concrete example of stubbing my toe and remembering something. Now I have that image in my head, just like we do we now have the metaphor of a noiseless, patient spider. We can hold that concrete in our head. And now we understand all of writing and creation, in a sense. It's not completed, but it's one form that we can now, which we need to think. We can't think without that. Otherwise, because if I always said it was like creation, what's a broad thing? We need the spider, is my point. You see what I'm saying?
I do. I understand what you're saying. I would describe it in this way, that a good poem creates a resonance.
Yeah.
And that resonance has magical qualities, because that resonance can also resonate inside of you. And whatever that means, whatever that sparks up, is completely up to you and how you're built. But the poet's job is to create a resonance that can be felt by other people. And that's a form of communication, a commonality that we so desperately need to build and rebuild the skills of connecting with each other.
We need to get better at that for sure. So we need more poets. Like what I want to say to you. Did you have a final poem or something to share?
I did. I wanted to do a little kind of performance stuff that I do at the open mics.
Let's do it.
This is kind of a hip-hop thing.
Let's hear it.
I mean, there's very little point in writing poetry when you're depressed and confused. I mean, who would want to read that shit? So your poetry sounds altruistic, maybe indecisive, obscure, possibly. But then there's Bukowski, the street poet, and his drunken rave on Edward Abbey. Oh, we need to read Edward Abbey. Edward Abbey channels the compassion of nature and the beauty and the myriad forms and the love that he felt for the land. We need more love for the land. We need more love for the humans. We need to hear the baby crying in the center of our hearts. We need to feel the elation of searching for the treasure with a friend. We need to be careful when driving our car and talking in voice recorder at the same time. We need to praise one another and lift one another up. We need to revisit the revival of old-time America when they rose up their face to the Lord and said, Lord, save me, redeem me. We are to stop at stoplights, but we ought to keep going sometimes. We ought to try harder. We ought to do unto one another as we would have them to do unto us. That's Jesus Christ, man, the Savior. We ought to live lightly on the earth, our mother. We ought to cry and be ashamed that our baby is in the center of our heart and is lonely there. We ought to shift gears when the time is right. We should go through all our phases and changes. We should accept the beauty of our city. We should accept the beauty of our sky, lit up with streetlights and signs showing the way. We are the way, the truth, and the life. Broadway, Hildebrand, used to be called Cowpath and River Road. Hazy highs, cars of all description and size, no two the same. Walt Whitman standing at the bus stop talking to a black man. His straw hat. He had memories, but we have cell phones and cell phone towers and lattes in little trailers and open mics on the steps of the stores. And so, if you want to do this thing, do it this way. Remind us of our frailty. Bind us together as love binds us together. Remind us of our failures, how we all make mistakes constantly and we do not grow weary of making mistakes. Remind us with your poetry, with your words, with your grace and motion as you move through this world. Remind us and give us hope with your obscure and lilting verse. Lay down a marker. Show us a sign. Preach it from the tallest soapbox. Let us know your prophetic vision. And then, and only then, will all our own diverse and disparate selves and all our children finally be saved.
Nice. Nice, man.
I haven't had a chance to perform it in public yet, so thanks for letting me read it.
No, thanks. So are you going to perform that soon?
Tomorrow, probably, at Hondros on North St. Mary's.
Why don't you plug something? So is that
Hondros at North St. Mary's every Monday night. It's awesome. It's amazing entertainment that goes on there for free. It's near Hondros. It's near Ashby and North St. Mary's.
What is that?
It's a bar. It's a club. They have music and they have spoken words.
Okay, I'll have to tag them. Okay. That's
Jandros.
Hondros.
Jandros.
I'm always looking for cool places to go to. Like I met you at the, what was that bookstop?
Imagine
Bookstore. And they had that great little band.
That was great.
They were really good from Austin. We need more of that in San Antonio. Mm-hmm. Like not just them coming from Austin, but
they had a thing going on. What's today? Sunday. It was Friday night at Roselle's at 7 o'clock. They had some bands, and I missed it. I had it on my calendar, so they do it
every week, pretty much.
I don't know about every week, but occasionally.
Regularly. It's a cute little shop. I liked it.
Yeah, and it's just open. It's free. You don't have to pay. It's not like a big venue. Yeah, it's comfortable.
Yeah, it's comfortable. I like that too. Yeah. All right, Ron. Any parting thoughts of wisdom from the local San Antonio poet?
Parting thoughts of wisdom. Well, you put me on the spot here.
Okay, it's okay. But check out What I Want to Say to You. That is the parting thought of wisdom. What I Want to Say to You.
There you go.
29 poems by Ron Bays. Is that how you say your last name?
That's it.
All right. Thank you so much for being on.
4th generation Baptist preacher.
There you go. Cool.
Thank you, man. Thanks, I really enjoyed it. I love good conversation, and I love that you're doing this.
It was fun. I had a blast.
Great.
Thank you.
Hey. Cool. Was that a good show?
That was fun.